Hello everybody, thanks again for joining us. I'm really glad that you did, because in today's project we're going to be creating a stained glass window. But we won't be using glass to create our window, we'll be creating it with acrylic paint on canvas. So let's get into it and draw our window up. In regards to drawing up our image, it may look a little bit complicated or daunting, but once you get these outside border construction lines in, if you take your time, it's really not that difficult. And I have a really great way of laying in these construction lines, and it involves a pen, in this case a chalk marker. I lock my finger in and use that as a sliding guide and lay my pencil in on the end. This way I can judge the size of any border, and I'll show you what I mean. This is an old signwriter's trick and I use it all the time. It makes drafting up straight lines so much easier. I'm just going to lay these curves in directly because I don't think it needs to be that exact. But if you like, you could use a compass. The whole thing about this project, I think, is conveying the feeling of lead light. A few sloppy lines won't take anything away from that. Rub out your construction lines once you're done. Oh, here's a tip. Don't do what I did by drawing your lines in too darkly, or they are difficult to remove. And pay close attention to where the lead lines relate to each other. And take your time. Drafting up a drawing onto canvas is often seen as the tedious part of the project, but it is so important. I must admit this is sometimes how I feel. I just want to get to the fun part, the painting. But this stage really does have a huge bearing on how your painting will result. The other thing you will notice is that I'm using graphite pencil as opposed to charcoal. Yes, charcoal is the preferred medium to lay in a construction drawing, as it is so easy to remove and it does not repel the paint like graphite. But like most things, there is always an exception to some rules. If I use charcoal in this situation, when I laid on my paint, the charcoal powder would contaminate my paint. The graphite lines are fairly thin, so I don't think there will be much of a problem. I use a ruler here to get my sizings correct, and again this is not compulsory. And watching this dub back, I'm surprised I used it. It must have been lying near me when I was drawing. Straight lines are just so straight. This is a 2B pencil, by the way. I like the old 2B. It's soft enough without being too dark. So the border is done and we can move on to our peacock. And again, this is easier than it might look to draw. The body is basically an S shape and all the feathers are identical and can be created from a few simple steps. So let's draw up our bird. The secret here is to keep your movement loose and flowing. Draw a little bump for his head, then his crooked little beak, the bottom of the jaw, the neck, and then onto the body. Once we have our outline, we can lay in some basic detail, like the head markings, the wing root, and we can lay in those primary feathers. I've simplified the feathers and stylized them in the way that they might be seen in a lead light. So I'll draw a couple more so you can see the steps. As I said, each feather is the same and is comprised of an outline. Give each feather a concave ending with quite a pointy tip. Once we have all the outlines done, we draw in a circle. The size of the circle relates to the size of the feather. The circle should be roughly positioned 3/4 of the way down the feather. Once the circles are created, draw in a triangle on the inside. Then draw a little semicircle and then a dividing line down the middle of the feather. From this dividing line, we draw 4 curved outlines emitting from it. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get them down. Well, our peacock is drawn up and we can start the next step, and that is to apply the paint. And to apply my paint, I'm going to use a Montmartre Taklon Angle. And the paint that I'll be using is the Montmartre Silver Series. So let's go and pick some. We'll grab some mid-green, light green cerulean, phthalo, cadmium yellow, titanium white and some sienna. Well, we have our paints now, but you'll also need a couple of other accessories. Obviously a plastic brush washer to wash your brush and a palette. Now I'm using the Montmartre paint pot palette, and I really like this because these little pots are removable. So you can move the pots around, and you can also use this just as a standard palette. Now regarding which colours to use where, we have provided a colour placement guide with all the colours and in which space they go. So I'm going to start with my cerulean first, so let's squeeze this out. Monastral cerulean is the dominant colour, so I guess that's a logical one to start with. And the main body colour of the peacock too. The Silver Series paints flow really nicely, so you won't need to thin them out. So on with the first colour. When it comes to the feathers, the 4th segment up is the one you paint cerulean. Do this on every one. It's important to get this patterning correct so they all correspond with each other. Now we lay on the light green, and this takes up the last 2 segments of each feather. Well, how good is this starting to look? Now let's squeeze out some mid-green. I don't know why it was so imperative that I get a close-up of me squeezing out that green, but there it is. Beautiful. And we'll lay that on next to the light green. Now for the phthalo, and this lies next to the cerulean. Refer to the PDF because some of those fancy tail feathers are phthalo too. Fill in each of the eyes in this colour as well. Now let's let our peacock really sing and add some vermilion. Vermilion is a lovely red. Actually, it's almost an orange. And doesn't that look great against the green? In this project there isn't a lot of it used, but it makes a big impact regardless. This is sometimes the case. For a little bit of yellow now, and in this case we're going to use cadmium. The last colour is the sienna. Onto that tree, and that's all our colours in. Well, this is dry now and we can start the next stage, which is to lay in the dark lines between the colours. This will simulate the lead, so to speak. Now I'm going to use Payne's Grey to do this, and instead of painting it on, I'm going to snip off the corner and pipe it on to get a lovely thick bead. So let's lay our canvas flat and squeeze our beads on. This time I'll be using the Payne's Grey in the dimension range. I snip off the hanging tab and then snip off the corner. How much that is removed has a bearing on how much exits and how thick that bead is, so be careful. Snip and she's ready to go. The trick here is to make sure you keep your arm movements fairly consistent and smooth. Make sure too that you keep the squeezing pressure consistent. If you squeeze too hard, the paint will come out at a great rate of knots and it will be hard control. And if it goes astray, it's quite hard to fix up. And again, take your time. You might like to do a bit of a practice run on some paper just to get the hang of it. To be honest, I was a little apprehensive at this step, but it turned out I found this stage a lot of fun. And if I ever have to decorate a birthday cake, I think my icing penmanship should be excellent. You'll be surprised at how quick it is. It's a lot faster than if I were to lay it on with a brush, and although the lines are a bit thick and clumsy, they are very fitting for our requirements. The other thing, it's not on film, but where the beads join, like in a T-section, well, that can be smoothed in with the end of the brush, and it looks amazingly like the join in real LED light windows. Now dry and we can move on to our final step, and that is to coat the entire surface with a tinted gloss medium, and it's tinted with a little bit of phthalo and a little bit of mid-green. This will help give it a real glassy look and it'll get rid of that stark canvas. So let's get this mixed up and paint it on. To create this, we need one tiny spot of phthalo blue and one tiny spot of mid-green. Then half fill a deep well plastic palette with some acrylic gloss medium and give it a good stir. If you haven't seen it before, this medium is a clear base and has many uses, from glazing to varnishing. When the two colours have been thoroughly dissolved, we can slap it on. A 50mm Taklon brush is perfect for this. Most clear glass in the olden days had a slight tinge to it. This should suggest that well. Now this stuff goes a long way and is quite thin. The coat will be naturally streaky, but this is just what we want. We want that old stained glass windows look. Wow, that's looking awesome. Well, I hope there was something in that for you, and I've said it before, even if you don't recreate the whole painting, maybe you can just use one element that really appealed to you or inspired you. And if you're not there now, then jump onto our webpage at www.montmart.net, where we've got lots more lessons. We also have our Facebook and our blogs, and we've also got our family feed, and if you subscribe to that, then you get a new project each week, as well as art, hints and tips, and lots of other goodies. So until next time, keep on painting.